The truth. The truth is usually relative to one's own psychology and their culture. In addition, one might not question the truth, for one might trust or respect the teacher's authority, so they don't question if it's genuine. Or one could have faulty genes in one's genetic heritage, trickery of one's senses, or a chemical imbalance that can lead to the misinterpretation of the truth. It can also be misconstrued by the idleness of a lazy mind that schemes over the surface, not allowing the truth to fully penetrate by not giving it the time that it truly requires or their full clear attention. And charlatans can make up or garble their own truths and then dish it out willy-nilly to unsuspecting truth seekers to impress, beguile, or to wield power, and these kinds of destructive elements can lead to arrogance or dogma. Arrogance is destructive, abusive and oppressive, and is a vexation to the pursuit of truth. In addition, if a governing body supports that arrogance, because of the fear of persecution, whole nations can be subjected back to the Dark Ages, or a time of spiritual denial and social and psychological oppression, or ignorance because of totalitarianism and megalomania. Nations can wage war on each other because of this, and the victors who eventually claim authority do not always tell the truth, hence, his story. The truth is also known to change its course in every culture throughout human history as our species advances with the latest technology and philosophical insights. So how can we know the truth if paradigms shift with different times, locations and technology, like what can be seen with science and religion with their old and new transient mindsets, or current popular beliefs within their scientific or their spiritual divisions? What is the reason for our existence? Is it just to eat, find shelter and procreate? Is it to search out the ultimate quest of whether or not there is a God, and if so, to also find our soul's purpose? The truth is that nobody truly knows the answers to these simple questions. It does seem that all life forms avoid pain and suffering and have a tendency to steer towards pleasure and happiness. Could the meaning of life be nothing more than sensory and emotional pleasure? It does seem that when we are low that life loses its zest and harmony, and when we are high the opposite comes into effect. Why should the thought of us being alive in the first place fill us with wonder? Are we looking for truths, or just getting high on mysteries and expectations? It does seem to be that the more we look at our universe, the simpler it becomes, as it is reduced to mere movement and cosmic energy. Yes, when one searches into the subatomic particles, all objects and life forms no longer exist. Everything is just movement and energy, and all is one. However, consciousness becomes more complicated the deeper that we observe it. On the surface it seems that it is just a byproduct of our five senses, neural processes and the interaction of our environment, but the deeper one observes it, one realizes that although it appears rational and secular on the surface, that it all seems to be spiritual and interconnected under the surface. Telepathy, psychometry and telekinesis show us that two minds can connect without speech. Objects that are touched can be tapped into mentally, and memories can be obtained, and objects can be moved mentally, to name just a few. The collective unconscious and morphogenic resonance show us that deep within our consciousness the individual boundaries dissolve, and we all have a collective unconscious mind for the former, and that each species can either upload or download vital mental and or genetic information to and from the morphogenic fields for their development for the latter. This literature is a portrayal of actual philosophical scholarly research that is a must-read for anyone who has ever queried if this reality is our only reality, or do we have souls, and are they given to us from God, or created with our sensory perception? Further, is there a God and a grand plan that leads us all to eternal paradise? And if so, then what is real? Do we evolve and live out our lives right here in Earth's future after holy judgment, or do we return to the source and relinquish our souls, or perhaps keep them as we evolve and ascend to heaven, which is said to exist just beyond our reality? Some scientists would have us believe that our minds are the byproducts of our brains. They say that it's when a group of synapses correlate when firing that they create a harmonious song, which gives rise to the sensation of self, which creates the illusion of consciousness. However, how can they write off the provocative questions that arise from the anecdotal accounts and scholarly research on out-of-the-body experiences? Synchronicities, precognitions, or from achieving godhood as one awakes spiritually with meditation and contemplation, spiritual disciplines and scholarly research, or when one is out of their body and on the astral planes as one opens one's mind to other selves and dimensions, or witnesses God's actual presence with synchronicities and serendipities and sees the grand plan with precognitions, or attains divine union with psychedelics where one loses the self as one's personality is absorbed or dissolved into the whole. There are two allegories that were originally devised to shatter the empirical and scientific presumptions of the cause and effect hypothesis that scientific academics call our reality that are not true facts but suppositions, prattle and/or conjecture. The first was the farmyard chicken that looked up at the farmer's wife every day in expectancy of that she will throw him handfuls of quality food like she has done every single day of its life so far, and every day this is exactly what the farmer's wife did. Then, one day when the chicken was gazing up with expectancy for the corn, the farmer's wife reached down and broke his neck, for it was just the right size and maturity to make the farmer, their family, and herself a fine healthy meal. The second tale is that of a church mouse that witnessed every day at 3 o'clock that Immanuel Kant, who was as reliable as a Swiss watch, would pass through the church and he would stand on a particular paving slab causing the church bells to ring. Then one day he didn't arrive, and the bells still rang without him, clearly showing that the slab, the bells ringing and Kant were independent of each other. Now it is obvious by those two allegories that we tend to become blinded by our conditioning, and that we take it all for granted that we all live in the space-time continuum, and that we are governed by or within society's rules and regulations in our given society, and we are all in harmony within the natural laws and restrictions of physics, and that there is no more than to live out our lives, die, and nothing else to life but our mere existence. Looking out through the fish tank at deep reality. To conclude my works and research on deep reality, I must stipulate that my findings have been both provocative and inspirational to say the least. For example, let us take a look at simulation theory and evolutionary gameplay. The former in that we are the simulation of a numbers of probable simulations that arose from one-time beings, or entities that had the know-how and the way in which to create the original simulation, which in turn reached an intellectual or spiritual level where they create their own simulation ad infinitum. So it is a high probability that all of humanity's existence as us humans and all life in the universe are probably a simulation. And the latter being that evolutionary gameplay with its built-in survival mechanisms have eat, drink, clothes, shelter and procreation as their main objective, and everyone's happy. However, for those beings who do not fit into the lord/bondsman regime and find life boring as they spend their time on the earth counting blades of grass, in that they have a burning desire for clarity or a need to understand our reality, and they are known for their unique qualities and are called the individuals, as they don't fit in and see society as a sham. These so-called individuals mainly live a life of frustration and confusion until they fall into the constraints of incompleteness theory within the sciences, politics, or philosophy that fulfills their needs and also helps humanity to progress in these fields. However, can we really never really know deep reality, or are we on the verge of discovering our origins not as a species, but what, who, where, which, when, how and why do we exist? I mean the simulation, evolutionary gameplay, and incompleteness theories may give us our soma and make us happy slaves as we live out our lives in accordance to norms of ours or any other given society, but do you really want the lies? The sciences, philosophies, and the theologians can see that with their latest research, breakthroughs and aspirations that change is afoot within their paradigms and that they must comply to their findings or they will all face extinction. Basically, they can see that our reality is like being in a fish tank that is made obvious from their intuitions and their scientific experiments in that they have discovered anions, amplitude hadrons and cosmological permutations that seem to hold the key elements of the universe's locality and existence. And mediums and spiritual teachings share their experiences of the afterlife, or their insights, so we can all be happy fish and live a life of virtual pleasure listening to their endless inspirational tales of above and beyond that for them and us fundamentally holds the answers to life's uncommon wisdom. Now I can see what it is that the scientists can see when they smash the particles together. That being that space-time is like a fish tank and we are the fish. But are we just there in the tank for God's pleasure, and when we take off Don's headset are we absorbed into infinite consciousness or God and all our lives are just like the fish in a human or an actual aquarium and we are nothing but an instrument for God's pleasure? I mean, are we? Or our human and spiritual existence here to just place a smile on that omnipotent supernal entity's loving countenance? Or are we on a journey of self-discovery and to carry it over within our essence or souls, a subtle copy of our experiences from our ever-changing space-time continuum to not only make God smile but to add life, time and locality with its pleasure to its timeless, changeless and formless existence? Just ask yourself one question on how can ghosts, spirits communicating via mediums, near-death experiences, and out-of-the-body experiences even exist if the soul is an illusion? I can see that our spirit is intuitive, or God-conscious and ourselves are rational animals, or humans, and when they harmonize they give rise to the soul. Which are the syntheses or the catalyst along with our many lives in the spirit and the flesh to ascertain the aforementioned assumption that it is through us and life odyssey that God as life and form gets to not only imagine and create a supernal paradise but through life and all its variety, splendor and wonder it not only has found a way to not only create itself but it get to self-actualize eternity into eternal matter as it enters the gates of heaven. Everything but the kitchen sink. The multiverse is the washing up bowl, and our universe are the bubbles within the bowl. Spirit is the sink and the water in the bowl is space and time, matter and energy. The bowl has many plugs that are not stopped and they are the black holes that paradoxically suck energy out of the multiverse and at the same time through their messy eating habits debris that along with the quasars that also spew energy into the bowl form stars, galaxies, solar systems and life, which are the stepping stones to the discovery of one's God self, and then one can resonate with its ultimate desire of completing God's odyssey, like that of Homer's classic yarn, In Search of Eternity. Into the sink. The amplituhedron particle, which gets its name from the height of the scattering process when it's at its peak or amplitude, that are abstract interdimensional particles that form the subatomic particles and the superstrings within the vortex of the collision. Cosmological polytopes also help out with creation as humanity gets to leave the bowl behind and then finds a way to take of the headset or our attachment to the interface where we finally give up on our conditioning. Or the illusion and find a way with some modern technology and kick down the doors of perception, or overcome the restrictions, obstacles or barriers to that final frontier and meet our maker or makers as we enter the sync. Because of the findings and repercussions of the observation of the amplituhedron particles and the like. That theoretical scientists, particle physicists, and mathematicians all agree that the locality and the attainment of the epistemic universe comes into fruition from the aforementioned process within the collisions within the Hadron Particle Accelerator laboratories. They have now theorized that at 10 to the power of minus 33 within 1 cubic centimeter, and at 10 to the power of minus 33 within a second is outside of the space-time continuum, beyond the subatomic particles and into the sync. And they say that this newly discovered dimension is dynamic, and that there are strong implications that life or consciousness exists there and that it could be our creator, and if it is God, it's not alone. So it looks like we are going to drop the monotheistic God for the polytheistic or many gods who live as the ancient Greeks once penned with their mythology at Mount Olympus, where they believed that the gods resided, meddled, and played with humanity. The Pinocchio argument. There was a boy who wanted to be a puppet, and the puppet wanted to be a boy. The toymaker creates the puppet, who is tethered by its strings of which it must break free or emancipate itself from to become a real boy. And to achieve this, Jiminy Cricket, who is his higher self or nature, helps Pinocchio to transcend his lower self's drives and impulses, and he replaces telling lies with the truth, and it was then that the puppet and the boy merged to achieve what their hearts desired, and eventually they were both happy within eternity. Psychology states that religion is a halfway house between sanity and madness, assuming that we are all chemical robots that are conditioned by our environment's genetics and culture. We have no soul, there is no God at the helm, or heaven. It also states that what is normal or abnormal human behavior. However, if one observes any given society, it seems that normal is not always normal to everyone or to other cultures throughout the world. For example, what is normal or acceptable for one political law-abiding society or culture is abnormal, irrational, or totally unacceptable to another. For example, psychology analyses its findings, which gets released as a paper, gets criticized, judged and accepted or rejected. And if accepted by the old school ties in the upper echelons who sling mud at it because it differs from their beliefs, or they are flattered, which creates intellectual ripples, and we have a paradigm shift, or synthesis, like in the dialectic, like when the world was hypothesized to be situated upon the turtle's back. Detaching the puppeteer's strings. Mathematical scientists proclaim that consciousness cannot be created from matter, but matter can be created from consciousness, and so it concludes that consciousness and not matter is fundamental. Basically, particles are rational, as they decide on a very basic conscious level on what they do. So the base root of matter is consciousness and the particles being conscious. This means that the universe has a basic consciousness with humanity and its God-self connection that with meditation that humans have discovered is at the top. Basically, there are many levels, or diversities with consciousnesses on planet Earth alone, let alone the alien question, as life seems highly probable throughout the cosmos. Now, because the universe's atoms are conscious, it means that the universe is conscious too. We are not saying that inanimate objects are conscious like our clothes and our furniture. We are saying that the particles within the chair are particle conscious. And it is the same for our human bodies, and because the primary character traits are always taking the easiest way or the most efficient route, that we are innate zombies, and emancipation can be attained with our connection to our God selves, or a connection to the ultimate consciousness. Ironically, I must point out that without that basic process, the universe and life within it would not actually exist in the first place. However, that being said, let's rewind to get back on track. So it is then that chemistry follows suit or emulates the particle consciousness, and animals' minds are governed by their chemistry, and we are not but smart monkeys, so our thoughts and actions are prone to take the easy route too. Basically, the philosophy zombies, or Pinocchio, are governed by the same innate mechanical basic lower self drives and impulses, and just like Jiminy Cricket for psychology is the ego, or one sense of reality, if Pinocchio awakes he can cut the strings and then he can become why he was actually created. Basically, particle consciousness are the basic drives or the strings that tether us to the lower self, and all one has to do is to meditate and listen to one's ego, and then when the time comes for us individually or globally, we get to enter eternal matter. The chariots of the gods. The driver of the chariot is one's intellect that holds the reins that steer the chariot, as one's drives, impulses, and one's self-awareness that has evolved by the coming together of the dark and light horse that leads the way on the journey to heaven. In short, you have the light horse, the dark horse, and the gray horse, and there are 3 roads in your life's journey that all head in the same direction. However, there is only one true path that leads to heaven. If one listens to only their dark horse, they are on the left road, which is selfishness, evolution, survival, procreation, selfish drives, greed, rationalism, logic, and blind impulses that are forged through one's journey through one's perception and meta-consciousness. The light horse on the right road leads to selflessness, denial of reality and God's treasures and gifts that come with grace, and blind altruism that are forged through phenomenal consciousness. If one travels down the left road guided by one's dark horse, then at death one will remain on the death, birth, and reincarnation process, and if one doesn't eventually awake and attain one's conceptual mindset or mindfulness and spiritually evolve at the end of days, one will enter the gates of hell within eternal matter. On the other hand, if one follows the light path, One is on the opposite or right path that leads to denial of one's soul and the relinquishing of one's innate values along with one's property as one sees the physical world as an illusion, which can be unraveled by letting go of one's thoughts and the material world, so as one can attain union with God or the infinite conscious being that is fundamental to all reality. However, this not only displays a blatant act of self-denial, but it also shows a lack of gratitude and respect for the wonderful treasures and gifts that are God-given utilities to bring about growth and change with love and wisdom. So at the crossing, one is also placed back on the bittersweet path of life and death as one gets reincarnated. And at the end of days, one becomes pure awareness. But if one chooses the gray horse, then moderation for the left path and meditation for the right path combined and merged that are in perfect harmony from one's dark and light horse as they come together, which leads to self-awareness, objective thinking or consciousness that at the end of days culminates with the manifestation of one's soul, which is the combination of the spirit and the flesh that is attained on the middle path that through spiritual utopia and unconditional love and virtuosity at the end of the days completes one's journey as one creates, adorns and enters the gates of heaven into eternal matter as one works, rests and plays forever and ever within the infinite and creative shores of love and bliss within all eternity. The journey is the path from God or phenomenal consciousness and humanity or metaconsciousness to attain self-awareness, which through grace and one's exploration of God's gifts and treasures within the play, which one picks up along the way within one's karmic destiny, one enters eternal matter as a combination of the dark horse or one's selfish drives and needs and the light horse one's selflessness and denial, hence missing out on one's true nature within reality that together in harmony leads to the gray horse that walks down the middle path that at the end of days where at the journey's end one enters a new beginning as an individual and one free immortal spirit, as one with all and everything living in peace, bliss and spiritual harmony within eternal matter and or spiritual utopia within the infinite shores of creativity and creation.